Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. My wife and I bought our house about 3 years ago. It's a nice place in a decent neighborhood with good schools and quiet streets. The previous owners had converted the attached garage into a home gym, but we turned it back into a functional garage since we actually needed the space for our cars. We installed a proper electric garage door and everything. It cost us nearly $3,500, but it was worth it. Our next-door neighbor, I'll call her Karen because, well, that's what she is, moved in about 6 months after we did. From day one, she was a nightmare, always complaining about something, always sticking her nose in everyone's business, and always acting like she owned the entire neighborhood. The first sign of trouble came when she knocked on our door at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. "Your trash cans are visible from the street," she announced without so much as a hello. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes. Yeah, it's trash day. They're supposed to be hidden from view. It lowers property values when people can see garbage cans. I stared at her, confused. "We don't have an HOA here." She huffed like I'd said something offensive. "It's just common courtesy." That was my introduction to Karen, and things only went downhill from there. She complained about our lawn, cut too short, our garden, too many vegetables, not enough flowers, and even the color we painted our front door. Apparently, forest green is tacky. But the real problem started when her daughter moved back home with her. Suddenly, they had 3 cars for a house with a single-car garage and a narrow driveway. Instead of parking on the street like a normal person, Karen decided our driveway looked like a good alternative. The first time I came home to find her Lexus parked halfway across our driveway, I knocked on her door. "Hey, I can't get into my garage," I said, trying to be polite. She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Oh, is that a problem? I'll only be there for an hour or so." "Yes, it's a problem. I need to park my car." She sighed dramatically. "Fine, I'll move it. But the street parking fills up so quickly." That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Every few days I'd find her car in our driveway. Sometimes she'd move it right away, but other times she'd claim she couldn't find her keys or needed to finish something first, leaving me waiting in my car. After the 5th time, my wife suggested we install a security camera aimed at our driveway and garage. Great idea. At least we'd have evidence of her trespassing if things escalated. And escalate they did. Last month, my wife and I had to fly across the country for my cousin's wedding. We'd be gone Thursday through Monday, 4 nights away from home. I made sure everything was set, mail stopped, lights on timers, security system activated, and both our cars safely parked in the garage. We left early Thursday morning in an Uber to the airport. That evening, I got a notification from our security camera. I opened the app to see Karen standing in front of our garage, pressing the code into the keypad. How did she get our code? Then I remembered. About 2 weeks earlier, I'd had to give the code to a delivery person who was dropping off a new refrigerator. Karen must have been watching from her window and seen the whole thing. I watched in disbelief as our garage door opened and Karen backed her Lexus inside, right next to our cars. She then closed the garage door and walked away like she owned the place. I was livid. I called her immediately. "Karen, why is your car in my garage?" I demanded when she picked up. There was a pause. "How do you know that?" "I have security cameras. Get your car out of my garage right now." "Don't be ridiculous," she said. "You're not even using it. You're away. My daughter has friends over and we needed the extra space in our driveway." "That doesn't make it okay to use my garage. It's just for the weekend," she said dismissively. "Your cars are still protected. I don't see the problem." "The problem is that you're trespassing. Get your car out now or I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," she said, and hung up. I was fuming. I called the local police department's non-emergency line and explained the situation. They said they'd send someone over, but since it wasn't an emergency and I had admitted giving out the code, even if not to her, there wasn't much they could do besides talk to her. An hour later, I got a call from Officer Rodriguez. "Sir, I spoke with your neighbor," he said. "She claims you gave her permission to use your garage while you're away." "That's a lie! I never gave her permission!" "Well, she says you did. Without clear evidence of breaking and entering, this becomes a civil matter. You gave out the code and she says you gave her permission. I'd suggest changing your code when you get back and sending her a formal letter revoking any perceived permission." I couldn't believe it. Karen had lied to the police and they couldn't do anything about it. I called my buddy Mike, who lives a few blocks away and has a spare key to our house. I explained the situation. "That's messed up," Mike said. "What do you want me to do? I could go over and try to get her car out." That's when an idea struck me. A petty, wonderful, possibly insane idea. "Actually, I have something else in mind," I said. "How do you feel about a little construction project?" Mike was a contractor, and I knew he'd have the skills for what I was planning. I explained my idea, and at first he thought I was joking. When he realized I was serious, he laughed. "That's the most passive-aggressive thing I've ever heard," he said. "I love it. Count me in." I sent Mike money for materials via Venmo and gave him the go-ahead. Then I sat back and waited, checking the security camera feeds occasionally. Friday morning, the camera alerted me to movement. Mike and 2 of his crew arrived with a pickup truck full of concrete blocks, mortar, and other supplies. They carefully built a brick wall in front of the garage door, on the inside of my property line, of course. They didn't completely seal it. They left a small gap at the top for air circulation. I didn't want to be responsible for any harm to her precious Lexus. They worked efficiently, and by Friday afternoon, the wall was complete. It looked surprisingly good. They even matched the brick to our house. From the street, you couldn't tell anything was different. The garage door was still there, but now there was a solid brick wall right behind it. I sent Karen a text message. "I noticed you're using my garage without permission. Since you clearly needed it so badly, I've made some improvements to secure your car. Enjoy your weekend." Then I turned off my phone. My wife thought I was crazy when I told her what I'd done, but even she had to admit it was ingenious. We enjoyed the rest of our weekend at the wedding, and I didn't turn my phone back on until Sunday night. I had 37 missed calls from Karen, along with various threatening texts. The security camera had captured her complete meltdown when she discovered what we'd done. She'd tried to open the garage door only to find a brick wall behind it. The footage showed her screaming, kicking the wall, and eventually calling the police. But here's the beautiful part. There's nothing illegal about building a wall on your own property. When the police arrived, they explained to Karen that it was a civil matter. She couldn't prove the car wasn't abandoned on my property, and I had every right to secure my garage however I saw fit. On Monday, we flew back home and took an Uber from the airport. As we pulled up to our house, Karen was waiting on her front lawn. She stormed over as we got out of the car. "You've got some nerve!" she shrieked. "I've been without my car for 4 days because of you." I shrugged. "And I've been without my garage for 4 days because of you. Funny how that works." "I'm suing you for false imprisonment of my vehicle." I couldn't help but laugh. "Good luck with that. You illegally entered my garage using a code you spied on. You parked there without permission, and I simply did some home improvements while you were trespassing. The police will make you tear down that wall," she threatened. "No, they won't. I already spoke with them. It's my property, and I can build whatever I want inside my garage. But tell you what, I'll have the wall taken down tomorrow. That should give you plenty of time to think about respecting other people's property." She was shaking with rage. "My daughter had to cancel her plans. I had to Uber to work. Do you have any idea how much this has cost me? Probably about as much as all the times I had to wait for you to move your car from my driveway, or the $3,500 I spent installing a garage door you had no right to use." My wife, who had been quiet up until now, stepped forward. "And just so you know, we've changed the garage code, and we'll be putting in a camera inside the garage too, so if you ever try anything like this again, we'll have clear evidence of trespassing." Karen stomped her foot like a toddler. This isn't over, but it was. At least this round was. True to my word, I had Mike and his crew remove the brick wall the next day. Karen's Lexus emerged unscathed, albeit dusty and with a dead battery from sitting unused for 4 days. She had to call AAA to jumpstart it. Word of what happened spread through the neighborhood quickly. Several neighbors privately congratulated me on standing up to Karen, who had apparently been making everyone's lives miserable. For a few blissful weeks, Karen avoided us completely. No complaints about our yard, no passive-aggressive comments, and definitely no parking in our driveway. It seemed like she'd finally learned her lesson. But this is Karen we're talking about. The peace couldn't last forever. About a month after the garage incident, I came home to find Karen's daughter's car blocking our driveway. Not in it this time, but parked directly across it so we couldn't get in. I took photos for evidence, then called a tow truck. The car was gone within 30 minutes. Later that evening, Karen pounded on our door. "You had my daughter's car towed!" she accused as soon as I opened the door. "Yep, it cost her $275 to get it back." "That's unfortunate," I said. "Maybe she should try parking legally next time." Karen's face turned an impressive shade of red. "We've lived in this neighborhood for 30 years. I raised an eyebrow. "You moved in 6 months after we did." "I meant the area," she sputtered. "We've never had problems until you people moved in." "Funny, we've never had problems with entitled neighbors thinking they own our property until you moved in." She jabbed a finger at me. "This is harassment." "No, Karen. Harassment is repeatedly parking in someone's driveway after being asked not to. Harassment is entering someone's garage without permission. Harassment is what you've been doing to us since day one. All we've done is enforce our property rights." She opened her mouth to say something else, but I'd had enough. I closed the door. The next day, I installed a retractable metal bollard at the entrance to our driveway. We could lower it when we needed to drive in or out, but it would prevent anyone else from using our driveway when we weren't home. Karen, predictably, filed a complaint with the city claiming the bollard was a public hazard. The inspector who came out took one look, confirmed it was completely on our property and met all safety requirements, and approved it on the spot. Karen then tried to start a petition among the neighbors to force us to remove the bollard, claiming it was unsightly. She got exactly 2 signatures, her own and her daughter's. We've been living in relative peace for about 2 months now. Karen still glares at us whenever we're outside, but she hasn't tried to park in our driveway or garage again. The security cameras stay up, the garage code remains changed, and the bollard does its job perfectly. Last week, I noticed a for sale sign in front of Karen's house. Apparently, she can't bear to live next to such difficult neighbors any longer. The real estate agent who came by to introduce himself warned us that Karen had been bad-mouthing us to potential buyers, so I gave him a USB drive with security footage showing all of her trespassing incidents. "Just so you have the full picture," I said. He thanked me, watched some of the footage on his laptop, and laughed. "This explains a lot," he said. "Don't worry, I'll make sure any serious buyers know who the real problem is." So, that's my story of how I dealt with an entitled neighbor who thought my garage was her personal parking space. Sometimes you have to get creative when dealing with Karens. And sometimes, just sometimes, a brick wall is the perfect solution. Edit. Wow, this blew up overnight. Thanks for all the awards and comments. To answer some common questions. 1. Yes, I checked with a lawyer friend before doing the brick wall stunt, since her car was illegally parked on my property, and I made sure the car had ventilation and wasn't damaged. I wasn't legally liable. 2. No, I don't feel bad about it. She had been warned multiple times about parking in our driveway. 3. For those asking if this is really legal, it's a gray area, but my lawyer said the worst that could happen would be a civil suit, which would be hard for her to win given that she was trespassing. 4. Several people have asked why I didn't just have her car towed initially. The simple answer is that most tow companies won't enter a private garage to remove a car without police approval, and the police had already said it was a civil matter. 5. About changing the garage code, we've completely replaced the opener system with one that uses randomized codes in our smartphones, so there's no fixed code for her to spy on anymore. Update. 3 months later, Karen's gone but left me a parting gift. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my original post about bricking up my garage with Karen's car inside, so I figured you'd all appreciate an update. First off, Karen's house finally sold about a month ago. The listing price kept dropping every couple of weeks, which was pretty satisfying to watch. It eventually sold for about 15% below market value. Karma's real, folks. But Karen wasn't going to leave without trying to get the last word. 2 days before her closing date, I got served with court papers. She was suing me for emotional distress, illegal detention of property, and damage to professional reputation. She was asking for $25,000 in damages. My wife nearly had a heart attack when she saw the papers, but I just laughed. She's just trying to scare us and squeeze some cash before she leaves, I told her. Still, I called my lawyer right away. My lawyer, Jen, was equally unimpressed with the lawsuit. "This is a textbook frivolous case," she said. "She's hoping you'll settle quickly to avoid the hassle. We're not going to do that." Instead of cowering, Jen helped me file a countersuit for all the trespassing incidents, the stress she'd caused us, and the legal fees we were now incurring. We also filed for a restraining order to keep Karen off our property during her remaining time in the neighborhood. The judge granted the temporary restraining order right away. Karen had to stay at least 25 feet from our property and was prohibited from contacting us directly. All communication had to go through our lawyers. The day after the restraining order went into effect, I caught Karen on our security camera standing at the edge of her property, exactly 25 feet from our house she'd obviously measured, taking pictures of our place. Not illegal, just petty and weird. A week later, we had our first court appearance. Karen showed up with a lawyer who looked fresh out of law school and extremely uncomfortable to be there. The judge, an older woman with a no-nonsense attitude, asked Karen's lawyer to explain the basis for their claims. "Your Honor, my client suffered significant emotional distress when the defendants imprisoned her vehicle behind a brick wall without warning, causing her to miss work and incur considerable expenses for alternative transportation." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And where was this vehicle located at the time of the alleged imprisonment?" "In the defendant's garage, Your Honor." "And did your client have permission to park there?" Karen's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "My client believed she had implied permission." At this point, I watched the judge trying not to roll her eyes. My lawyer then presented the security footage showing Karen using our garage code without permission, along with documentation of all the previous parking incidents and police reports. Your Honor, Jen said, this was a case of a homeowner taking reasonable steps to secure their property against a repeat trespasser. My clients ensured the vehicle had proper ventilation and was not damaged in any way. They simply exercised their right to modify their own garage. The judge turned to Karen. Did you ever directly ask for permission to use their garage? Karen's face reddened. Well, not explicitly, but they were away and not using it. The judge shook her head. That's not how property rights work, ma'am. After about 30 minutes of back and forth, the judge dismissed Karen's case with prejudice, meaning she couldn't refile it. Then came the best part. The judge ordered Karen to pay our legal fees and approved our countersuit to move forward. Karen stormed out of the courtroom, her face a mix of rage and embarrassment. Her lawyer stayed behind to apologize to the judge and to us. I tried to advise her this was a losing battle, he said quietly before hurrying after his client. 2 days later, Karen moved out. Her daughter flipped us off as they drove away, but that was the extent of their goodbye. We thought that was the end of it, but of course it wasn't. A week after she moved, we received a letter from our homeowner's insurance company. Someone, who could it be, had filed a claim alleging that water from our property was damaging the foundation of her former house. The new owners knew nothing about this and were surprised when an insurance inspector showed up. The inspector found absolutely no evidence of water damage and closed the claim immediately. When I told him about our history with Karen, he just shook his head. You're not the first neighbor I've heard about dealing with someone like this, he said, but the best news came last week. Our countersuit finally completed, and the judge awarded us $7,500 for harassment, trespassing, and legal fees. I doubt we'll ever see that money from Karen, but the judgment will follow her. If she ever tries to buy another house or take out a loan, this will show up on her record. Out of curiosity, I looked up her new address from the court papers. She moved to a condo in a building with, wait for it, assigned parking and a strict HOA. I almost feel sorry for her new neighbors. Almost. We're now enjoying our Karen-free existence. The new neighbors who bought our house are fantastic. A young couple with 2 kids who actually brought us cookies when they moved in. The husband is a car enthusiast who admired our garage setup and asked for recommendations on garage door openers. I told him the full story, and he laughed for a solid minute. We were wondering why the realtor emphasized the parking situation so much during the showing, he said. Now it makes sense. Life lessons from this whole experience. 1. Document everything. Those security cameras were the best investment I ever made. 2. Know your rights. No one can use your property without permission, no matter how entitled they feel. 3. Don't back down when you're in the right. Karen counted on us settling just to avoid the hassle, but standing firm paid off. 4. Sometimes the best revenge is simply enforcing boundaries and letting the other person deal with the consequences of their own actions. Mike, my contractor buddy, still brings up the brick wall at every cookout and family gathering. It's become our neighborhood legend. He even suggested we create a small brick wall monument in the backyard to commemorate the victory. I might just take him up on that. I've also replaced our driveway with stamped concrete that has "no parking" subtly worked into the pattern. It's a small reminder of our victory every time I pull in. As for the bollard at the end of our driveway, we kept it. It's now painted a bright yellow and has become a conversation piece. Several neighbors have asked where they can get one installed. The whole experience made me realize how important it is to stand up to bullies like Karen. People like that count on others giving in just to keep the peace. But once you show them you won't be pushed around, they usually move on to easier targets. So if you're dealing with your own Karen, remember, document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to stand your ground. A brick wall might be extreme, but sometimes that's exactly what's needed to make your point. Final update. I just found out from our neighborhood grapevine that Karen tried to join the board of her new condo's HOA, and was unanimously rejected after the background check revealed her legal history with us. Sometimes justice does come full circle. Thanks for all the support, Reddit. Your comments and suggestions helped more than you know during this crazy time. I'll raise a beer to all of you from my Karen-free garage tonight. The next one is a malicious compliances story. 13 years ago, when I worked for the UK government, I lived on the south coast of the UK and worked in London, so I had a reasonably long commute of about 90 minutes on a train each way. I had a motorbike accident which severely injured my left leg and hip, so I asked my HR department and boss to allow me to come in earlier and finish earlier to avoid rush hour so I wouldn't have to suffer the pain of standing on a packed train all the way to work and back. They both agreed. Our office had a flexi-time workday of 8 hours, 7 hours plus a 1-hour lunch break, between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. How you chose to do that was up to you. However, business needs often dictated that some people needed to stay later or whatever, so my agreement with HR would allow me to circumvent that and just stick to my new agreed-upon hours of 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Of course, due to the train times, I would get into the office about 30 to 40 minutes before I was due to start and would leave 30 minutes after my agreed-upon finish time, and I always put in an extra hour of work a day due to that, and I also often skipped my lunch break and just worked through it if needed to. There followed a blissful year of me managing my time perfectly and getting into the office without being in pain. When a new manager came into our office, he pulled me aside after a few weeks and said, "There is a perception in the office that you leave early." Of course, he wasn't privy to the agreed-upon change in my time and didn't like the fact that I got in early and left early when he usually had to stay until 5 p.m. at the earliest and 8 p.m. at the latest. So he arbitrarily changed my work hours from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day, meaning that I had to stand on the train to and from work, also meaning that by the time I got into the office in the morning, I was in extreme pain. He still expected me to start work early and finish late, though, like I had been. He told me that this had been agreed with HR as it had been over a year since my accident, and I was expected to have made a full recovery. I hadn't, though, and in fact, I still suffer from a weakened leg to this day. However, my new contract hadn't removed the clause that allowed me to only work 8 hours without any expected overtime. So, I would get into the office at 8:15 to 8:20 each day, and sit reading the newspaper, or sometimes literally doing absolutely nothing, which infuriated my boss even more, and clock in exactly at 9 a.m. and then clock out exactly at 5 p.m. no matter what I was doing. I would also take exactly 1 hour for lunch each day, regardless of whether I was doing anything. He tried to arrange meetings for before, after, and during those times, and I would decline them, or leave during a meeting if it overran. There was nothing he could do about it. When he complained to me, I pointed out that it was in the contract that he had signed off with HR. Sadly, he made my life more difficult in other ways, and the pain in my leg got worse due to having to stand to and from work. So this shitty situation only lasted for a few months before I quit. Still, those few months got him very angry, so it was kind of worth it. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see